I mean, I hate to put Mazzulla on blast tonight.
No, we can do
But
it. I'm no,
okay,
I'm tired of
okay,
him.
okay. Because but
I'm
like,
just gonna say it right now. I'm tired of
what
him.
what was that decision late in the game to go offense defense with Horford and Porzingis? Because you ask me tonight, Porzingis was the best defensive player out of the Celtics locker room.
Well, how about the other night against the Houston Rockets when the Houston Rockets consistently brought out this was at the end of the game too when you had again offense defense you actually had timeouts in between so you had time to sub whoever you wanted in and out of the game. That play with Alperen Şengün where he is streaking down towards the rim, cutting towards the rim, gets that wide open pass, wide open dunk because Cornette blows his assignment. Well, even on that play, I would say that was bad. That was a bad personnel decision by Joe Mazzulla. If you're defending the Houston Rockets, the Rockets, I believe, had Amin Thompson, Dylan Brooks, Jalen Green, Fred VanVleet, and Alperen Şengün on the floor. You hear those first four players, right? Şengün is your big out there, but those first four players, Brooks, quicker guard, not the quickest of guards on their team, of course, but Amin Thompson, very quick, very athletic forward out there. Jalen Green, we know about his athleticism, his quickness. I don't know for Fred VanVleet was the inbounder, and even him as a smaller guard. Again, another quick player. Well, why do you have the double big lineup out there with Cornette and Porzingis with all these players? And Kristaps Porzingis, this is where the miscommunication was. Kristaps Porzingis wasn't even defending the lane. So you have two bigs out there, neither of which are by the bucket to defend a layup or a dunk. And it's a complete just mismatch all over the floor for the Boston Celtics, particularly defensively, because I look at that double big lineup the other night against the Houston Rockets and I go, well, that was specifically for the offensive end of the floor and to gain mismatches offensively because those four players you can't necessarily guard up with Cornette and Porzingis out there because there's going to be a mismatch somewhere. And really, the Celtics, what they were trying to gain is either that mismatch on Kristaps Porzingis or put a smaller player on Luke Cornette, bring him off of Luke Cornette, and really get Luke Cornette those rolls to the rim or even put him in that dunker spot. And that's more of an offensive personnel set the Celtics
Right.
had out there the other night playing defense on the Houston Rockets. And we saw the play afterwards. Peyton Pritchard came into the game, and that was the better personnel decision. But that was confusing the other night. And then tonight, I would say Al Horford and Kristaps Porzingis. Now, for me, Al Horford, he's actually been pretty surprising defensively how good he's been this
Right.
past month, really, for the Boston Celtics. But for me, I do think Kristaps Porzingis, if you're going to put him out there, you have to put him in the right situations. And if he's hot like he is tonight and coming up with some of the numbers he had tonight, just put him in there. Go out there and place him out there on the floor. And I really don't, to me, I don't necessarily understand some of the personnel decisions specifically matching up with other teams when it comes to Joe Mazzulla and matching lineups. But furthermore, I'm going to go into this real quick. Offensively, it feels like we have no philosophy on most nights. And even tonight, I thought it showed a lot. I thought last season it showed a lot too. And even though the Celtics won the championship last year, I thought they very much did it as a collective team, playing collective ball without necessarily having a set philosophy in place. And this season, I think at times it's completely hurt themselves because we've seen the shot chucking all over the place. And we've seen moments like the other night against the Rockets where Jaylen Brown is just taking it by himself, doing whatever he wants. And even down the stretch of this game tonight, Brown and Tatum, I would say the last two shots of the game, they were not good shots. Now, thankfully, Brown and Tatum, they showed why they're superstars. They made those shots and they came up huge for the Boston Celtics. Yet those were not good shots. It didn't feel like the Celtics had a legitimately drawn up play for either one of them on that possession. Or really, I look at this too. The Celtics might have a play drawn up, but then they don't have a secondary option. They don't have a tertiary option within, oh, this goes wrong. Okay, we're going to go here. Even before halftime tonight, 4 seconds before halftime, timeout called. We go to commercial, which was just ridiculous. I mean, come on, 4 seconds. Like play out the half, folks. Play out the half. I'm glad we got more Dunkin' Donuts commercials and we saw all that. But ultimately, 4 seconds. Okay, we inbound the ball to Drew Holiday. New Orleans, they have a foul to give. They cut 1 second off the shot clock. Well, why didn't it cross the mind of Joe Mazzulla or anybody in the Celtics coaching staff that was going to happen? You're going to have essentially, okay, you're going to have a play. Oh, you pass to Drew Holiday and He's going to get fouled. Okay, well, now you're going to have a baseline out of bounds play after the timeout, essentially. And the play that we ran, it resulted in a Kristaps Porzingis huck from the logo. I mean, it looked like he was looking for one handoff, and that wasn't there. So, and I don't have anything else, and so I'm just gonna dribble, and shoot from the logo. I mean, some of these moments, I do wonder. I talked about it before coming in here on postgame. Brad Stevens was talked about as one of the best coaches in the league. Talk about all the ATOs, all the different X's and O's in which Brad Stevens was always able to draw up for the Boston Celtics out there, specifically offensively, even defensively. And that series against the Toronto Raptors back in 2020 and Nick Nurse, that was a real game of basketball chess. Those were two of the best coaches in the game, making the smallest little adjustments on both ends of the floor to get their players open, to defend the other team, and take away multiple options, or to really gain multiple options for themselves. Joe Mazzulla, most of his praise, from what we see, is just from the fact of, oh, well, he's doing a good job in his role taking over the Boston Celtics since being thrusted into the spot after Ime Udoka inexplicably went through his incident on the team. Yeah. And really, Joe Mazzulla, he gets praised because he deserves a little bit for the fact of, well, he's younger than Al Horford. He's really not the typical age of a head coach. He's one of the younger head coaches in the NBA. And he has done an all right job with the Boston Celtics coming in and doing what he's asked to do. But you do look at a lot of situations, whether it's offensively or defensively for the Boston Celtics, like I was talking about the other night, like I was talking about earlier tonight before halftime, even down the stretch. It just doesn't seem like the Celtics are really that tactically sound. They're very talented. They know how to kind of make things up on the go and know how to play collective basketball. But from a philosophical standpoint, from a strategical and tactical standpoint, the Boston Celtics, they don't always seem like the most sound team. And that's really my biggest rift with Joe Mazzulla. And I got to say, I'm not a full Joe Mazzulla hater. I don't want to come across as that. But when criticism is due for what we see out there on the basketball floor and what correlates with the coaching staff, we have to rightfully talk about it. That's what we have to do. That's just what the case is.
I agree. I thought coming into this year, right, which is kind of why I'm so skeptical on what to think right now. Coming into this year, I said countless times, Joe has the flexibility this year, right? The season's not a pressure cooker, right? You won the finals, pressure's off. You can try things, right? You can really get experimental, and you can see what works, what doesn't. You might lose a game because something doesn't work, but guess what? It's not the end of the world, right? You know that doesn't work. I think we're seeing that, which, like, in my mind, I'm like, okay, he's trying some new things. This is good, right? But on another hand, and this is where I agree with you. Recently, right, you're having a rough stretch of basketball, right? So there are some things that are just no-brainers, right? It's a no-brainer tonight to keep Porzingis on the floor because defensively, he's really was your backbone tonight, right? That's a no-brainer. You don't need to try out tonight against the Pelicans going offense, defense with Al Horford and Kristaps Porzingis, which you've probably already done, right? Like, so again, that in terms of that experiment, I don't like that. He's done some, like, throwing in Drew Peterson in the mix sometimes. I like that experiment. Or throwing in Springer we've seen recently. I like that experiment, right? There's other Walsh trying out Walsh. Like, the Keita experiment, like, you kind of figured out Keita can play. Like, so there's other things he's done that is good. I like that, right? And then if we're talking from an offensive standpoint, right? I'm sorry, but I've seen the same play of Tatum going downhill on the sidelines out of bounds since the game winner back in 2023 against Philadelphia when we first saw it. And ever since, in that same scenario, when the ball's in that same location, we've gone to that play. And it sometimes works, but to me, that kind of tells me that Joe Mazzulla, and I've said this, I like Joe Mazzulla. I think he's got enough crazy in him. I think he's a player's coach. I think he's relatable. I think he's a great guy. But he's not an X's and O's guy. He's not. He is not a guy that is going to make adjustments, that is going to outcoach the other guy. He's not going to do that, right? And I think the truth with Joe is and this is nothing against him, he got dealt a great hand, right? He got dealt an amazing hand. Here he is at what, 36, 37, in his second year coaching what is arguably the best constructed roster we've seen in the past 25 years. And, again, so I'm with you. I think Joe Mazzulla, from a personnel standpoint, is all over the place in terms of what he is doing in X's and O's. I don't think he's a good X's and O coach, right? But at the same time, Seamus, I don't think he really necessarily needs to be. And I will say this in his defense, Boston was really, really, really good down the stretch in those playoff games last season. So I agree this year, though, right? It's gone to a point where it's like, okay, can we talk about this, right? Like, can we at least address this a little bit?
Well, specifically too, we talked about the offensive end a lot, but defensively as well, I think the mismatching or the matching up with other teams and when the Celtics decide to switch, when they don't decide to switch, there have been just too many moments this season and really recently where we've seen a lot of this. A lot of this from Tatum, from Pritchard, from Cornette, from whoever it is, Jalen Brown. I thought we were supposed to switch on this. I thought we were supposed to do this particular action on this play, and it doesn't transpire. And I wonder, I go, well, what was said in the huddle on this, or what was given specifically? I don't even say in the huddle or during games. In film session, when you're going through it in film session, you watch other teams and go, okay, we want to do this specifically with this player to take away this action from this team. We're either going to switch this, we're not going to switch this. We want you on this player, and when they try to switch you on here on another player, we're going to try to scram this. We're going to try, and this is really what I'm saying right now is not very specific to a given situation, but it's just in general. You go through a lot of film session where you look at the other team and go, this is going to be our strategy against this team. This is what we're going to try to do. And even we've talked about this in the past, when things change within a game, you have to kind of make it up on the fly and go, oh, there's an adjustment here we have to make. And I really
never been good at that. He's never been good at that.
Look at I look at the Lakers. Okay, well, I want to say this about Joe Mazzulla real quick. He does take accountability for it, which I'll give him that, give him praise for that. Very accountable head coach, is what you're talking about. How he has enough crazy in him. He's a good guy. He's very accountable as well. But look at the Lakers interview at the end of the first quarter the other night on TNT. Okay, and that was actually a week ago now. But he was essentially saying, after Kristaps Porzingis started the game on a dominant tear, the Lakers, they adjusted their defense, forced the ball away from Porzingis. And what Joe Mazzulla said in that interview was, we just have to keep making the right decisions with what the coverage allows us to do. And those aren't his exact words, but that's essentially what he was saying is, well, whatever the coverage, however the coverage is lined up here defensively, whatever they're forcing to us, we're going to take. And part of that is all right, and I can understand that from if that is your only option, you're going to go to that option. But ultimately, that's where you kind of highlight and go, well, if the Lakers made an adjustment for their defensive coverage against your offense, why not? The reason they made an adjustment is to force the ball out of somebody's hands and force you to go to a less efficient option. And then what we saw was Joe Mazzulla say, well, we're actually going to keep going to that less efficient option instead of readjusting to get the ball back to our first option, our primary option, our most efficient option. And that's what I took out of that little small interview at the end of the first quarter. I understand what he was saying in terms of, oh, well, here's the coverage, here's how we want to play against the coverage, but and essentially, oh, we're gonna take the play in which the coverage allows us to take. But at the same time, I look at it and go, well, where's the adjustment going to be? Where's the readjustment going to happen within the game? Are you just gonna the Lakers, if they force the ball out of Porzingis or Tatum's hands, or even Jalen Brown's hands to start the game? Well, are we just gonna go to Pritchard the rest of the game? Just gonna go to Hauser the rest of the game? We have to make some sort of an adjustment to really put the ball back into our most efficient players' hands. And I think that's really what Joe Mazzulla, he's never really been that strong at adjusting in game. And it does bite the team at times, I believe. And it's just something that we do have to talk about every now and then because we do see it out on the floor. And this season, I think it's affected the team really. I wouldn't say more than ever because I thought it really affected the team in 22-23 because his first season, like there were some real
Oh
disasters
my God,
in
the
there.
playoff.
I mean, no doubt the first two games against the Miami Heat, that was something else, I will
Yeah.
say. But I think it's gotten better since that point, but it's still regardless. I don't look at Joe Mazzulla and go, wow, he's just this Brad Stevens-esque. Now he's not expected to be either, but he's this Brad Stevens-esque uh, coach in the league wherever he coaches, giving him praise for what he's running out there. I think a lot of coaches look at what he's running and go, this is basic. This is basic, and it's hard to stop because they have guys like Brown, Tatum, Porzingis out there,
Yeah.
Derek White, and Drew Holiday. But if you replace, say, if you were to replace the Pelicans and Celtics rosters right now, I'm not saying the Pelicans will be worse than what they are because. I mean, I don't know how they could be any worse than what they are right now, 12-37. I mean, I guess you could be 0-4 right now, 0 and what,
You could be the Wizards.
49. Oh, you could be
Just
the
6-win
Wizards, who
Wizards.
are on the second 16 game losing streak of the season. Oh, by the way, I don't see any Wizards post games out there. I've been trying to find them. Apparently, nobody makes them. I just think the team doesn't deserve them this season. But
Yeah.
essentially, the Pelicans. The point is here, if you switch rosters, right? I don't know if Joe Mazzulla, I don't know if he's receiving as much praise as he generally does with the Boston Celtics. And that's not to say, oh, the talent has just made Joe Mazzulla, because Joe Mazzulla has done some good things as well in the Celtics organization to build the culture up and even win a championship last year. But again, it goes back to the conversation of tactically, strategically. Joe Mazzulla, he's really talk about middle of the pack role players. Joe Mazzulla is probably middle of the pack head coach in terms of the X's and O's. Not to say he can't get to the top of the pack one day, but at this moment in time, he's certainly in the middle.
Well, and you know what? That's the question for me, right? It's like, okay, you got because you have to really look at the whole Joe Mazzulla experience, right? Like he was not expecting, right, following a NBA Finals appearance, being a back of the bench coach, right? He was not expecting to be the head coach of a team trying to get back to the NBA Finals and win a championship 4 months prior, right? Like he got thrust into this position, right? And you know, for me, he was pretty atrocious that first year in terms of those playoffs with X's and O's, right? But like again, that was okay. It's like you're a first year head coach, period, right? Like really like first year head coach experience, period. Um, you come in. I thought he got better last year. I think he made improvements, but for me, it's like I'm not seeing that next step that you'd think he'd take. Right? It's like okay, like a lot like because really Joe is he's a very young head coach, so a lot like a 20-year-old rookie in the NBA. Right? Each year you're going to get a new element to his game, and I think right now with Joe, you're not seeing that like you know that extra that because you can teach X's and O's, right? You know, there's a level like Spo, right? Spo gets it. Some coaches just get it. Brad Stevens was a mastermind. You mentioned Nick Nurse, right? Those guys are just, I think, intellectually in the game of basketball are just a little bit different, right? But you can, learn X's and O's when you see enough basketball and you're in enough situations, right? You gain the knowledge and you kind of develop in that aspect. I haven't seen that this year from Joe, which is a little disappointing, I will say, because I am a Joe Mazzulla guy. I mean, I really am. I think he's got something you can't develop with this group, and that really is that little crazy factor to get these guys up and going. But I do think when you look at a lot of the things that have been shaky in this in this patch for the Celtics, I mean, a lot of it has been personnel. In under Joe Mazzulla, and I mean, I'm right there with you. That Rockets game. I mean, he came out and said it. I mean, it was bad. Like it was terrible. The execution coming in, yeah, it was so bad. It was so bad. So talk about let's bring the highlighter back. I'm pretty sure I highlighted him back in mid-December, but I'm gonna re-highlight Joe Mazzulla. I'm gonna make it a little bit darker, and we're gonna get back onto this because there is definitely some room for improvement from an X's and O's standpoint from Joe Mazzulla.